Again, in light of how the market conditions have changed, how the financial conditions have changed, how can they go about having a successful solar career right now in 2023?
One of the biggest challenges is as installers are struggling to be able to cash flow their installs, it's going to affect timelines. It's going to affect capacity, right? Some jobs go smooth, but most of them have some sort of a trick that we have to figure out. Most people understand that and they're okay with it as long as they've been told as to why.
All right. Welcome back to the Solar Surge podcast. Hey, if you're new to the Solar Surge podcast, on this program, we meet with the top CEOs and the top industry leaders in the solar plus storage space, really to make sure that you all have the best up-to-date market information, especially for those of you who are in the solar industry, whether you're a sales professional, contractor, electrician. We want to make sure that you have the best information, and that's why we go out and try to find the best guests who are sharing how they've found success in their solar businesses. Now, in today's program, I have a special guest for you. Jared Gillespie is the CSO and co-founder of Fusion Power, headquartered in Arizona, one of the top Arizona solar companies. And for those of you who don't know Jared, I'm just going to give you a quick background on his bio here. Jared's been in the solar industry for 17 years, beginning in 2003, starting in direct sales, including door-to-door selling. He also has done satellite TV sales in the past. From 2005 to 2013, Jared managed home security teams throughout the country. And in 2013, Jared was hired to help establish the direct sales program at one of the largest solar companies in the U.S. and led his team to be the top installing teams in the industry. Jared is married and he has 5 children. So Jared, thank you again for joining us. Welcome to the Solar Surge podcast.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm excited to visit with you today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you on as well. Obviously, you all had a massive presence at SolarCon last month, and so congratulations on that. Just kind of curious, how has business been going for you all? It seems like you have a lot of energy and a lot of momentum.
It does. Yeah, we've been working really, really hard. We have an incredible team, and it's funny as you go through the different phases of growth and you bring in new talent. Our COO always says, where we're going to be in a year from now, half the people that are going to help us to get there aren't even here yet. And so it's been really fun to see all of the new growth with the people and the talent that we brought in to take us from kind of one level to the next. But right now we're at a really good clip. I'm excited where we're going. We're pacing with our business plan this year. Obviously, it's always really tight as you're trying to follow those numbers week to week, and you have to make up when you have dips, and you're grateful for those weeks where you overproduce. That gives you a little bit of insurance. But we're pacing well, and we have a lot of good stuff going on the sales side, on the operations side, on the finance side. So we're excited. We're very optimistic about what's happening with the business right now.
Well, that's great. We're excited for you and your success as well. Obviously, as I said, just tons of momentum, it seems, coming out of SolarCon. And I know that you've also started your own podcast. I've had a chance to see a number of your podcast episodes on the Fusion Power Company channel, including the most recent one that you did with James Reese, who is your head of procurement. And I think I actually would like to dig into some of the topics that you touched on the interview with James, because Jared, as you know, solar companies right now are facing some of the biggest headwinds that we've had, at least as long as I've been in the industry. Whether it's rising interest rates, whether it's tighter cash flow requirements in terms of being more difficult to draw advances for materials purchases and things like that. So I guess let's just start out there. Jared, how has the solar business changed in the last year? From your perspective as an install platform, an install company, and what do you think it's going to take really to be successful in this new environment?
And it's a great question. Anybody that's joined solar in the last year probably felt like, what in the world did I just get a part of? Because it has been, we've always called it the solar coaster, right? It's always all over the place. It always has been in the last 10 years that I've been doing solar. But boy, the last couple of years have been especially turbulent. And maybe even you asked about the last year. I think I might even go back 2-3 years. Really, with the start of COVID is when it just kind of started getting bonkers. During COVID, all of a sudden supply chains completely shut down. So if you don't have supply, that means your demand's high. No supply, what happens to pricing? It goes way up. And so, on that episode with James, he talked about how hard it was to find even some of the most basic parts. And those that you could find, you were paying 10x for some of those parts. And so not only was it difficult to be able to procure the equipment and be able to install in a timely manner for our reps and for our sales partners, to do it at a decent cost was very difficult. And so whatever margin we thought we were going to be able to make as a company to be able to continue to operate went down to nothing. And that's a major challenge for installers that we're still dealing with. We're seeing some loosening on some of the equipment pricing, but a lot of it's still really high. And as you're dealing as an EPC, you rely heavily on your cash flow, and that cash flow is going to come largely from the margins that you're able to maintain off of installs. But when you have the pressure of high dealer fees, meaning reps are having to sell lower, and having to have the prospect of possibly bumping up red lines to maintain that margin for operating capital, you're in a very, very tight spot. And so it's been very interesting as we've tried to navigate that stuff. But between supply and pricing, and then now over this last year with interest rates going sky high due to inflation, with dealer fees doing what they've done, it's added a lot of extra challenges. With all of that said, and cut me off if I'm going too long, if you want to break me off here, but one of the biggest challenges is as installers are struggling to be able to cash flow their installs, it's going to affect timelines. It's going to affect capacity, right? And so you're seeing a lot of installers that will install a job, but it's taking them 6 months to get PTO'd. Well, the way that the lenders fund, it's based on getting PTO'd. It's based on getting those jobs on the roof. And so if I'm a lender and I'm giving an installer an M1 payment for thousands of dollars, but I'm not getting my return, that job's not getting installed for 6 months, that's a lot of money that I'm floating. And so we've seen lots of problems on the lender side where they're not able to they're not able to execute on their contracts. And now lenders are having to tighten up. They're getting away from M1 payments, which makes it even harder now for installers to procure their equipment because they rely on that M1 payment, and it makes them harder to be able to pay their sales reps, which is vital to keep sales reps happy and able to continue to produce. So there's a lot of challenges out there right now for sure.
Yeah, and as somebody who has been on the contracting on the install side and now find myself more on the sales side of the business, I mean, I can understand the pressure that you have to deal with, especially when, materials are not available, or if the material cost changes violently, you can't necessarily just immediately pass that through to your dealers in the form of a higher red line, or can you? Because I haven't really seen that, even though I know that's an issue that you've had to deal with on the EPC side.
Yeah, and for us, what we've always tried to do is we've always had to try to have standard equipment, right, where you don't have to pass on an adder. But there's just a lot of panels out there. There's certain brands that are just high priced, and it's like we have to charge an adder and pass that on to the customer. And so those higher wattage and some of those more premium panels, we just charge an adder. And if the reps want to use those, great, they can. They'll just need to pass that cost on to the customer or eat it themselves, I guess. But we always make sure that there's still a base level module and inverter that is not going to affect the reps' pay. Absolutely.
So Jared, I guess you touched on the issue of M1s and advancements from lenders to installers, and I know that's been sort of a big change in the industry this year, as a number of the popular financing companies have really curtailed how they're willing to advance funding, or some have done away with it altogether, it seems. What does that mean for a solar contractor? Maybe as a sales rep doesn't quite understand what kind of position that puts the contractor in, but what does that mean for a solar contractor? And what do you think we're likely to see over the next 6 months or so as contractors have to deal with that new cash flow reality?
And it's a great question. I hope that reps can understand this because, I grew up in sales. And so there's a lot of stuff that I just assumed was happening. I get paid. And if I don't get paid, then that means the installer either doesn't know what they're doing or they're being greedy or something, right? I put on the installer, but it's really important to go up the river to find out what's happening here. So, if you're doing any sort of volume as an installer, you could be spending anywhere between $100,000 to $1 million a week on inventory. On top of that, you're paying your crews, you're paying your account managers, you're paying your service techs, you're paying your building and your insurance and your cars and your vehicles, you're paying your advances on sales. But you could be cash flowing, you could be having to float hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars a week. That's very difficult for a business. And so installers in the past have largely relied on advances, the same way that reps rely on advances from their installers. Installers rely on advances from the lenders to be able to help cash flow that business, to be able to get an M1 payment, a portion of that contract price, buy the equipment, pay for all those operating costs that we just talked about, and pay in advance to the sales company. Well, if that money's gone and that's dried up, now what is the installer supposed to do? How are they supposed to install? How are they supposed to be able to do everything at the same speed as they once were? It makes it very, very difficult. So they either have to raise outside money, or they have to slow down operations and wait for other install money to come in and then backfill, reimburse, and give them capital to fund the next round. But it's going to end up slowing things down. So Joe, to answer your question, like, what are we going to see? We're going to see one of two things. We're going to see install time slow down for companies that don't have, if they haven't raised capital or they don't have a good cash position. We're going to see install times are going to have to slow down for them to be able to cash flow that. Number one. Number two, and more serious, is we're going to unfortunately see a lot of companies go out of business. I fear for a lot of the companies in California right now, and we'll get into NEM2 and 3, I'm sure, in a minute, but right now you have this massive influx of accounts that took place in March, and those installers have paid out all of their cash in M1 payments to the reps, but now they don't have any money to fulfill. And so they have this huge backlog of installs, but no cash to actually buy the equipment to install it. So unless they had cash on hand, or unless they're able to negotiate extended lines of credits with the lender suppliers, it's going to take a long time to get through those pipelines. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of those companies just have to fold and say, we just can't do it. We're out of money. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but unfortunately, I think that's kind of where the economics of this thing are going to end up playing out.
Yeah. And I actually had a chance to sit down with another install company CEO during SolarCon, and we talked about this issue for about half an hour, that tightening credit is kind of exposing how credit dependent many of these companies are, whether it be on the install side, the sales side. One thing that a lot of sales reps probably have experience with is the fact that most homeowners are using credit to purchase the solar system. And so credit approvals and interest rates and monthly payments, they see that side of it. But what I don't think a lot of them understand is that the installer's operations are also very much dependent on credit, whether it be advances from the finance company or lines of credit from the material suppliers to, again, allow you to get your hands on the material, install it, and then hopefully close out and get paid for the project before the invoice is due with the material supplier. And so if all those credit transactions, if there's no credit to facilitate those transactions, that these businesses are going to have to try to maneuver into a different operating rhythm, and many of them may not be able to execute that turn. I guess we'll see. I mean, the biggest one that we've heard of recently was Power Home and their bankruptcy. But I'm hearing that other companies that may have been in a marginal cash position going into all this slowdown, they may be left by the wayside with all this. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be really important that EPCs get on top of their finances. We really need to be mindful of what it's going to look like in the future, what cash flows are going to look like based on today's volume, and what money's coming in, what money's going to be required to go out to fund the growth of installs, depending on what your pipeline is now or what you expect your pipeline to be. But I think that a lot of companies that are forward-thinking, you're seeing a lot more of those installers having to reduce M1s, or we've seen a lot of them having to get away from M1s altogether, because whatever money they still may get from the lender, and again, most of them there is no M1 anymore, all of that cash that's available is going to have to go towards operating the business and buying that equipment. And so I think as sales reps, have these conversations with your EPCs, have these conversations with your installers, try to find out where are they, if they know, if they're up to speed on this, but find out, are they going to be able to continue to pay you M1s? If not, then what does that mean for you as a sales group? Well, as a sales group, you're taking 95% of the margin on commissions, on profits on these jobs. And so hopefully you've been smart and you have a cash reserve. You can still pay your guys M1 payments yourself. But if you're going to have to rely on your EPC, that may not be an option. And so it's time to start preparing. If you're a sales org leader, if you're an owner of a sales org, you may need to start kind of prepping reps. M1s may be a thing of the past here in the next several months, depending on what happens with the markets. But you need to prepare for that, because as we know, most reps are not able to go sell a job and then wait 6 months or 6 weeks to get paid, or 8 weeks to get paid, or whatever that is. And so you do need to come up with a contingency plan and make sure that you're either hitched to the wagon, to an installer that is still able to maintain M1 payments, or you are going to have to cash flow it yourself, or figure out some way to be able to maintain and get these guys going. But obviously sales is always the answer, right? If you have a good pipeline and you constantly have installs coming in, you don't need to rely on M1 payments. And so anytime somebody gets upset or anybody talks to me about, I don't like the idea of an M1 payment going away, I'm like, I get it, but you can easily solve that problem just by consistently selling every week. You're always going to have an install every week, which is way more than your M1 payment anyway. And you'll have plenty to live on. So that's going to be the short answer, is just, if you want to avoid this problem, make sure you're consistent in your production. Absolutely.
No, I mean, that sales solves all problems pretty much, right? And now is not a time to retreat. I mean, if you're serious about being successful in this business long time, now is not a time to retreat. Although now may be a time to, as you said, if you haven't already, make sure that you have some sort of an emergency fund or the ability to cash flow your operations if there's a short-term disruption in your income.
And it is important, though, even if you are consistently selling. We went back to that idea of the backlog, especially in California. I mean, right now, you put a new deal in the pipeline, that's like getting on the freeway in rush hour out there. That car's not moving, right? That job's not moving forward. It's got too much in front of it. And so make sure that you're very aware of what your installer's pipeline is looking at and what their capacity is to push those through and get through. So it's going to be a function of both their personnel, how many teams do they have, how well are they able to process on the design side, on the accounting and account management, project management, on the permitting, utilities, how fast operationally are they able to move, and what kind of capacity do they have there, and then also what we've already talked about, do they have the cash or do they have the inventory already in place that they can fulfill and get those installed right when they're ready and approved to be installed. So those are two things that you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to if you're a sales group out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question, is because, we saw, like I think many California companies, we saw, and not that Solar Surge is a California only company, but we did a lot of business in March with our California installers because of people wanting to get in before the NEM 2.0 to 3.0 rule change. So can you explain a little bit from your perspective, as an install business, what does that look like and what does that do to your business where you have a huge spike in sales? Let's say you have triple or quadruple your normal volume, but then you have it fall off to maybe half the volume that you had before all that. Like, what does that do internally?
Yeah, so I mean, what you hope to do is you hope to be able to maintain a volume or be able to predict a volume, right? And so it's so important that you have a business plan and that you get good forecasts from your sales partners as an installer, because I need to know if I sell 20 jobs this week or 50 or 60 jobs this week. Well, in 6 or 8 weeks from now, whenever that job is ready, I need to be able to install that. I need to be able to have the capacity. So I need to say, if I've got 60 jobs here, well, then I need to have 15 crews by this date. And if I have 15 crews by this date, before then, I need to have this many designers, this many account managers. I need to make sure I have the trucks, and I need to make sure I have the inventory. And now we take that. Now, what's the cost of all those? Do I have the cash to start hiring now? Do I have the cash to start buying and ordering that equipment right now? Right. And so I have to go down a whole bunch of different levels to make sure that I'm prepared for 6 weeks out. If I wait for 6 weeks out, that job is ready to get installed, or all 60 of those jobs are ready to get installed from 6 to 8 weeks earlier, but I'm still running with 5 crews, what happens? Well, now I have to schedule those jobs out 2, 3, 4 weeks from now. And now we've gone from a 6-week period to a 10-week period on an install perspective. And so now we start stretching things, and now we start getting, sales companies are getting very uncomfortable. Attrition starts coming through. Customers get tired of waiting, and so we see them start dropping out and cancellation rates go up. Those are some very big factors that you have to be paying attention to. And so as an install company, we have to obsess over that stuff. And so, like I said, we've got our spreadsheet that breaks down to 50 line items of what do we need to have in place and when, in order to fulfill whatever these projections may be. Now, going back to your question, when you have a huge influx of volume that you're not prepared for, that's what the effect is going to be. You're just simply not going to be prepared for it. and your timelines are going to end up slowing, and you're not going to have the cash to fund that operation. And so the fallout will end up being longer timelines, cancellations, and probably losing some of your sales companies. So that's on the front end. Now on the back end, what happens? You had all of that volume. The installer's now working really hard to fulfill that volume, and now it just drops off. Well, now you're overstaffed. Now you have too many people, and now you're dealing with having to do a bunch of layoffs. And that's obviously never fun either. We never want to have to see and cut crews and, get rid of other people. That's never what you want to do. And you've sunk all that cost into buying all these extra trucks that you're not going to need now, and they're just going to sit in the parking lot until hopefully you can ramp back up again to that same volume. And so it's really important. Anytime that you have a spike in volume, you've got to make sure to be able to follow that up. So as an installer, I need to make sure, how do I ensure that my sales companies continue to pump that volume? Number one, I need to make sure I can fulfill it, right? We just talked about that. But number two, how do I keep them continuing to sell? The only way I can keep them selling is if I can fulfill for them on a timely basis. Because the second that slows down, their production is going to drop, and I'm going to end up in that problem. So how do I keep getting them to sell? I got to be able to maintain. I got to forecast correctly, have my operations in place, and then stay really close with my salespeople to continue to bring in that volume, so I can continue to maintain. Otherwise, I'm going to have to deal with layoffs.
That's great. Thank you for explaining all that, because I do think it's very easy as a sales organization to just see an increase in volume and think, well, there's tons of commissions now coming in. It's not realizing that it actually poses much more of a challenge on the fulfillment side to be able to deal with a temporary burst of high volume, but then having to go back to maybe the same volume or maybe even lower volume in California. Because as you said, you can't just buy a bunch of trucks and hire a bunch of people and then have to let them go 1 or 2 months later once the pipeline is clear. It can be very challenging.
Yeah, and if I am a sales company, right, we talked about, as a sales company, you need to ask, what is your capacity and what is your cash flow right now? If they don't have it, and hopefully your installer is willing to be honest with you, and hopefully you have a good relationship where you're willing to continue to put accounts with them if they do have that capacity and they do have the cash flow. But if they don't, you got a lot of people you need to take care of. And so it's important that you find other options and other installers, other EPCs that can do that fulfillment for you. So right now we're seeing a lot of companies having to pivot for that reason. But shop around. I'd love to talk to anybody, but there's a lot of great companies out there that do have the capacity and do have the cash flow that can fulfill for you. But make sure that you have contingency plans to ensure that, if your installer comes against a wall and they can't fulfill anymore, you don't want to lose your guys. I was talking to a recruit a couple weeks ago where I think he said half of their lead setters all went home because it's like, well, we're not going to be able to fulfill and get installs for you for the next 10 weeks. And the lead setters, all right, we'll bounce and go find another company. And they basically lost everything that they've been working so hard to build up to. So that can definitely be tough.
Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining all that, because whoever you're working with, whether you're a sales organization, whether you're an EPC company, at the end of the day, it really is a partnership. And I think if you're looking for long-term success, you need to look at it as a partnership. What's good for one is good for the other. And, I can understand kind of short-term thinking, hey, I just want to get a job installed fast. I might break an install relationship and try fulfilling with somebody else. But the reality is every EPC company is going to have to deal with this to some extent. And Jared, I guess I would ask you next, what are some red flags that a dealer might be on the lookout for that might indicate that their EPC partner may be on shaky ground?
Outside of California, because I'm not going to blame any EPC right now. You had a massive change imposed by the utility company, which created great urgency with a lot of people coming in. Some of those installers were ready and they were forward-thinking. They knew that there's going to be an influx. They prepared for it and they're continuing to install without a clip. Most of them were not prepared for the amount of influx. So I'm not going to hit them on that. But in every other market, that timeline is going to be a good reflection of how well are their operations set up. And so, at Fusion Power, we have basically our cadence of 21 days plus permit. Okay, we feel like between the kitchen table sale to getting site survey, design approval, permit, utility, all of that done should be 20 days or less for the most part, right? And then you're going to wait on the city for permitting, and you're going to wait on the utility for approval before you can get it installed. Once that happens, we will install it within 5 days. So our start to finish is going to be internally. We have a 22-day process, 22 to 25-day process, plus whatever that permitting time is that we can't control. I feel like we're pretty average, maybe a little bit faster than some, but if you want to use that as kind of a benchmark, if your installer is taking longer than that, outside of the permitting time that is not within their control, that may be a flag to look at and ask some of those questions. Is the speed, is it an issue with not understanding? Well, one, is it personnel, right? Is it a lack of, do they have a lack of staffing? Do they not have enough crews to actually get them on the roof? Is it a cash flow issue? Or are they getting jobs approved quickly, but having to wait a long time to install because they don't have the inventory, they can't afford the inventory? There's certain things that you can't, as a sales org, it's kind of hard to know without asking those direct questions. And so if you're seeing slow install times, it's good to call a meeting and say, hey, let's talk about these times. What are the reasons? And the installer should be able to tell you. It's like, well, if you're selling 4 hours away, that's going to be a slower install time. I'm not going to send a single crew up there on Monday, have them come all the way back, and another one back out on Friday. I'm going to wait till both jobs are there, and I'm going to install them both on Friday and Saturday to be more efficient. Well, that's going to slow that other install down by 4 or 5 days. So, if those delays can be explained, then whatever, take that explanation and see if it works for you. But if it's an overall, you're in a city that doesn't require permitting and it's still taking you a long time, there's something operationally going on there that might be a red flag that you'd want to kind of look at other partners and see, if there's a better option out there for you. The other thing that I would look at is, are your installers being dropped from their lending partners? I just met with the guy yesterday. I'm out here in Texas right now on a sales blitz, and I met with the dealer yesterday. He reached out and said, hey, I've been with an installer for the last 4 years. I really like them, but they just lost their account with Dividend. They just lost their account with LoanPal. They just lost their account with, I can't remember, Service Finance or something like that. But they lost these accounts. He said, I need to be able to sell. I need to be able to pivot. If I can't get approved with one lender, I need to be able to go to the next. So I said, great. Well, we have all the lenders that you want. We work with 8 of them. You can use any of them. We're on very good standing with those. But we had a discussion. We said, I asked him, I said, do you know why they're getting dropped by these lenders? He's like, well, not really. And so we kind of went through what we were talking about a little bit earlier. It's like, if the installer is not able to get the jobs put through quick enough, the lender doesn't want to deal with them because they're floating too much money. Or the other issue is we always talk about speed to install. The other is from install to PTO. Customer's going to start getting billed after install, but if that PTO doesn't take place for another 3 months after it's been installed, that's 3 payments the customer's making. They're unhappy. The lender's getting complaints. So the lender's going back like, we can't deal with this installer anymore. They're too slow. They're not getting jobs processed. They're not getting them finished, right? We can't approve funding on these jobs, and they're just sitting there empty for a long period of time. And so when you have unfundable jobs, or you have jobs that simply are not getting PTO'd, the lenders can't. They've got people they answer to as well, right? They've got their own investors. They're going to end up having to cut off those individual EPCs. And so if you see your EPC losing funding options, that's going to be another big red flag to look at.
Absolutely. Well, I know we didn't really intend for this to be a plug for Fusion, but if those folks that are out there, maybe they're interested in looking at a new dealer relationship, or maybe they're just getting started in the solar business, how would a sales organization go about approaching Fusion Power?
Yeah, we'd love to have a conversation. You can reach me, and maybe you can add my information at the bottom. But if you just go to fusionpowerco.com/dealers, there's a dealer landing page that you can fill out, and we'd be happy to get in contact with you. We install in California, Arizona, Texas, and then we'll be opening up Idaho later this summer. But we'd love to talk to you and see if we have some options that would work for you. I'm very confident in our operations. I'm very confident in our products. I'm very confident in our customer service and our rep service and our transparency. I think we have a great platform that can help you out. If you're looking for a new partner, or if you're looking for another partner to help out, supplement some of the challenges that you're going through, I think that we might have some solutions for you. So I'd love to talk to anybody that's interested.
That's great, Jared. Thanks for that. And just, full disclosure here, Solar Surge does partner with Fusion Power in a handful of states. So It's a relatively new relationship. One thing I can tell, Jared, just right off the bat, though, is that you do have a company culture that really comes through in your messaging and your approach, and communication is really important to you all as well. I understand we would all like to, be able to throw unlimited budget into having the best software and everything perfect, but the reality is, you can tell as a dealer that communication and kind of keeping everybody on the same page is a priority for you all. So we're really looking forward to the growing the partnership here.
Well, I appreciate that. We've been very impressed with you guys so far. We look forward to a good partnership with you. One of our core values, though, is family first. And part of that is we want everybody to feel like they are part of a family and that there's that kind of a relationship where there's trust and communication and friendship there. And so we're very big on the customer side, on that side of the coin, making sure that they know exactly what's going on throughout the process, that they're getting automatic texts and emails at every time that project status gets updated, that they're getting live phone calls from our customer liaison so that they have a good, clean experience, which on the other side of the coin alleviates a lot of that extra work from our sales partners. But we also want to make sure that the partners are apprised of everything that's going on. And so they have they can log into the account and see exactly what's going on with that account and see all the statuses and sub-statuses and all of the activity and notes and be able to chat with an account manager if they have any questions. But that communication, that transparency is a big deal for us. Most people can tolerate delays and problems. Solar is a very complex construction project. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Some jobs go smooth, but most of them have some sort of a trick that we have to figure out. Most people understand that and they're okay with it as long as they've been told as to why. It's when there's a lack of communication that it's like, what's going on here, frustration, and then disillusionment. And so we're very big on that communication.
Excellent. Well, I'm curious. So you mentioned that you're expanding into Idaho as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the Idaho market and why did you choose that to be sort of the next territory, the next frontier for Fusion Power?
Idaho is kind of I'll say it's a bit of a gamble for us. My partner, Tyler McAllister, he's from there. He loves the state. He has a lot of connections up there. We understand that there's a lot of sales groups up there that are very unhappy with their current operations partners, with their current install partners. And we're confident in our operations. We're confident in the way that we run things, and we feel like we can give them a solution. The other side of that is it's somewhat of a new market. It's kind of one of those sleeper markets that you have a lot of influx of people moving from California and moving from other states into that Boise market. So we think that there's a lot of growth there, and the growth is going to come largely from people that are open-minded and looking for solutions to energy. The utility up there is a little bit of a wild card. They were proposing, and we're still unsure where they're landing on this, but they were proposing a change to the way they're doing their solar buyback. So we'll kind of have to play that by ear and see what's going on with that. But it looks like they're going to kind of follow what Utah did, and they're going to give a specific buyback, which is very similar to a lot of states anyway. So we're used to it in Arizona. We know how to sell it. We know how to train on it. So we feel confident that it can be a good market where we can have a lot of market share.
Sounds good. Now, I'm also curious, especially with the rule change in California and the potential that other states may follow suit with changes to the net metering policy. How does battery storage fit into Fusion Power's offering now, and where do you think that's going to be going in the future?
I think certainly the California market is going to lead the way with that. And for, simplicity of sale, I hope that the other utilities around the country don't do what PG&E or what California has done, specifically PG&E, where the buyback is so low, which forces the battery nearly. Now, you can still get away. I'll back up a little bit. You can still sell solar in California without a battery. You do a daytime offset, which is great. But if you're trying to do a full offset, you're going to need to have battery power to do that. The pricing of energy in California is so high that between solar and battery, your payment on that is still going to be equal or less to what you're paying right now. Most states, though, are not as high as California, and so the proposition of going solar with a battery as a savings proposition is not there. And so reps are going to have to change the way that they pitch. They're going to have to change the value proposition on what it is that they offer their customers if they want to include that, which is going to be forced on us if these other utility companies do that and get rid of their buybacks completely like California utilities have. But for right now, where you still have really good buybacks, and in some states where you still have actual net metering, full-on one-to-one credits, The batteries aren't necessary quite yet. We do want to be prepared for that, though, right? And so we're making partnerships with our battery suppliers. I'm really excited about some of the new technology that's out there with higher amperage output that allows you to power higher load items like central air conditioning. In Arizona, where our headquarters is, we've had a challenge getting a battery adoption because people in Arizona, it's like, well, I don't know why I would pay $25,000 for a battery if I can't keep my house cool if the power goes down. We're like, yeah, well, we use a lot of power with those 2 AC units. You need a pretty beefy battery to make that happen. And so the technology is there now, though. We just joined up with stores. If you guys saw them at SolarCon, they had a great booth there, but they've got the capacity to do that. And there's other batteries like Franklin and Palm Cube and some others that will allow that higher capacity. So I think the adoption is going to go up now that the capacity is higher. It's more going to be a function of pricing and reps getting into being willing to sell above the current pricing that the customer's paying for their regular utility.
Yeah. And one of the things, so I was one of the first guys selling batteries here on the East Coast, and we've never had a value, like a financial value proposition to make with the batteries. It was always about security and peace of mind and self-sufficiency. California still has this unique opportunity, as you mentioned, where even with the cost of the battery, they still end up with a lower monthly payment for solar than they would by just sticking with the power company. But any reps out there that might be listening, I just want to encourage you, there are reasons that people buy solar other than just the financial savings or the environmental impact. Some people just like the idea of being able to produce and use their own power, and they just want it. They just like the technology and they just want it.
And depending on where you live, like especially East Coast, where you have a lot of those grid systems that are terribly old and antiquated, they have a lot of power outs. And so the batteries just make sense, and people are willing to pay more for the convenience of not losing their power. The other thing is that a lot of those utilities, and even, in some of the newer states, the utilities are incentivizing people to add batteries. The demand on the grid, I'll go back to Arizona again, in the afternoon when you have 120-degree temperatures outside and everybody's running every AC, every air conditioning unit in the state all at the same time, that's an enormous power draw. And so if they can get people using batteries to relieve that grid pressure, they're willing to give incentives. So they've got some pretty aggressive incentives out for people that actually add batteries to the system. So I think that we'll see a lot of those kind of SRECs come through as batteries get more available and popular.
Yep, absolutely. And here at Solar Surge, we'll do our best to stay on top of those as those rules and as those incentive programs become more available. Jared, I know that we have a little bit of time left here, and I guess I would just sort of ask you in closing, if you had to leave, a final message with any of the viewers here, again, in light of how the market conditions have changed, how the financial conditions have changed, how can they go about having a successful solar career right now in 2023?
Plan. We're all very, very busy, and we all want to grow. We're all, if you're on the sales side, you're recruiting hopefully nonstop, and hopefully you're training nonstop, and you're trying to grow and bring in more accounts. But take the time to think and plan and write out your plan. Anticipate what are going to be your challenges. We've talked a lot today about the challenges you'll have with your partners. Discuss those challenges with their partners and see how they're dealing with those, and make sure that you're on board and that you feel good about the way that they're handling things. Make sure and ask those questions about their cash flow, about their capacity, about their forecasting, and what they have as far as getting ready for future growth. Make sure that you find out what their relationships are with their lenders. Look at their funding times. Take time to actually do that research and talk to your install partners so that you're not on the wrong train here, right? When I spoke at SolarCon a couple weeks ago, I talked about hitching your wagon to the right team. You have to be with a team that knows what they're doing. So take the time to research on the install side. And then on the sales side, make sure that you're doing a good job training. We have such an awesome opportunity with solar right now. It's a booming industry. It's growing like crazy, but we're still in our infancy. As you look at the projections of where solar is going to go, we're very, very small of where this thing is. And so there's a huge market share. There's a huge opportunity for all of us if we do it the right way. But we're growing so fast as a sales, I'm going to call a sales org across the country, that we're not taking the time to properly educate and train our people And there's so much misinformation given out to customers that can that make them upset, right? And when you have customers that are not happy with their system because they were told that a 50% offset was going to eliminate their bill, or that a retiree was told they were going to get a $30,000 check from the government for going solar, or that a 9 kilowatt hour battery was going to give them 100% of their power, including their AC unit, those kinds of things are going to result in complaints. Those complaints are going to hurt your installer. They're going to result in attorney general complaints. You get enough of those, then it goes to your different, legislative branches. And now we have problems with additional regulations. And you have additional documents from the state that customers have to sign. You have additional welcome calls that they have to do from lenders. You have additional licensing that you have to get in order to sell solar. So all of those things are going to end up making it more difficult for us to continue to move at the pace that we want to move. So please take the time to train yourself. If you don't know everything that you need to know, get the training you need. And if you don't have it, go talk to your installer, because they'll be able to provide it for you. They're the ones that have to deal with the brunt of all the customer complaints. They will be happy to correct anything that you don't know. Number one. Number two, if you don't have a good training platform for your people, then subscribe to some of these online, training. You subscribe to Knockstar or to Solar Academy or to D2D. Those are some really good sales tools. But as far as the technical and understanding how batteries work and how, utility offset's going to work against their bill, like that's stuff that you really need to sit down with your installer and figure out and teach your reps. I would, as an installer, we have a compliance requirement for all of our sales partners and all of our reps, where they need to watch a compliance video and and go through a whole bunch of other trainings so that they can understand the implications of what it is that they're selling. It's just so important that we, from a family first value, that we take care of our customers, that we give them the same deal and the same proposition that we'd want to get ourselves, or that we'd want our own parents to get. And so if we're not careful about that, we can really poison the well for everybody. And we don't want that to happen, because again, the opportunity is so freaking awesome right now. We all have a bright future if we can all just commit to doing it the right way. And then maybe if I can add just one other thing, is to make sure that you commit to values. If you don't have a value system that's driving you in the way that you live your life, you're going to end up taking advantage of people by default, because there's so much money on the line. I've never seen a product where reps can go out and make so much money so quickly. And unfortunately, the base side of ourselves is going to tempt us to take advantage of people, to omit truths, to change truths, to do whatever we can to get that sale, to make that big commission that we can put people in a bad situation. And it's never worth jeopardizing our own integrity to get a sale. And so find what your values are and commit to those values. If you commit to your values, you're going to get so much further in life. When you truly seek to help other people, you're going to be so much more blessed in your own personal life and with your business. You don't need to do things the wrong way. And so I think if we can commit to those things, to training and to high value, high moral character, we have an extremely, extremely bright future, as long as we take time to understand what are we going up against. What are our assets and liabilities on the sales side? What are our assets and our liabilities on the install side as we work with our install partners?
Let's say you're an installer right now. You've only been in the business for a few years, and all you've known is consistent growth year after year after year. And now it seems like things are a little bit shaky. What are some red flags maybe that the installer needs to look at on their own that might indicate, hey, there might be a structural problem here? And if so, what are some changes that they can implement now before it's too late and the business might fail?
Gosh, I will tell you that is such an awesome question. It's a question that we deal with all the time, right? While we are growing, we're not growing at the clip that I want. I think we're going to be almost double what we were last year, but it's still under where we want. So I look at what is affecting our growth, and so it's like, gosh, there's so many different factors at play, and you can never know for sure what it is. And so that so much of our discussions are, what are we missing? We're looking at our competitors. What are they doing with their sales orgs that's getting them more production? There's companies out there that might have a lower starting red line than we offer, but it's like, going back to the margin that we're talking about, we know that we need to operate off of a certain margin in order to be able to run the business healthily. And it's like we could bring in more volume and sacrifice that margin and put ourselves in a cash flow situation that's going to end up sabotaging that anyway, right? And so we have those debates. We have debates with, some of these installers that are doing premium mods without passing on that adder to the customer. And it's like, we could do that as well, but then we're going to be in that same situation. We're going to end up taking that 10-cent margin bath. I mean, sometimes we're only making 10 cents to be able to capitalize, to be able to run the business anyway. And it's like, if we give that away, we're just not going to be in a situation that's going to allow us to grow. We want to be able to show healthy financials. And so we debate with that all the time. It's like, where is the risk factor of like getting more volume and offering the sales orgs what they want versus making sure that we're on solid footing? Which one is more important there? And so we try to find kind of a middle ground on that. But as we're looking, one of the red flags I see is if I've got a sales org that's been with us cranking, and all of a sudden their volume just drops off, we did something wrong. I don't know if we did it wrong operationally. Did we miss the mark on communication? Did they get recruited by another vendor that offered them a better deal or what they think is a better deal? And so, when we see that happen, now it's operationally for us. How do we make sure that we have the bandwidth to have a good relationship with all of those, with all of our sales companies to find out, what did we miss something? How do we earn your business back? Or did your volume just drop as a sales org, right? As dealer fees go up, it's getting a little bit harder. And I think we've seen, you look at May's number or April's numbers to May's numbers industry wide, we've seen a little bit more of a dip than we typically see, which is going to be very, I think, respective to what we're seeing with the cost, where most reps are selling solely on savings, and that savings margin gets smaller and smaller. I think that we're seeing reps are having a harder time closing deals than perhaps they have in the past. And so that could be another thing at play here as well, which means, okay, great. We need to be able to provide better training for our direct reps, and we need to be able to get somehow in front of our sales partners and see if we need to help offer some training there on how to sell solar as a benefit, even though the savings margin isn't quite as high. So there's if I had a crystal ball and I had that answer, we would gobble up the whole market, but I don't have that. But that's a daily thing that my job I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I think there's some great nuggets of wisdom in there, and hopefully that message is getting to some of the right people out there, because I know through my personal experience, I know what it's like to be an installer and to not have a really firm grasp on everything that's going on inside of your business financially, and you feel the market pressure to, well, I've got a discount or I've got to cut here or there. And if you don't really know whether you can afford that or not, that those type of decisions could put you out of business. So, Jared, I think this is great information. I'm trusting that this is going to get to who needs to hear it out there. And again, I know we're kind of running short on time here now. So, if there's any
one other thing that I probably love to discuss too is and maybe you say this in your monologue at the end, but sales orgs, I know this is hard for you to hear, but you really need to want your installer to be profitable and have success. You want your installer to make money, because the more money they can make, the more sound operations they can provide you. If somebody gives you a bottom of the barrel red line right from the beginning, translation is, I don't offer you any other value than what's on this paper here. I'm not going to be fast. I'm not going to communicate. There's a whole list of things that I'm not going to be able to provide, because if I did provide these things, it would cost me money to do so, because I need to hire staff. I need to have more equipment on hand. I need to invest in software. If I'm going to provide you with a good experience, I have to invest in that, which means I can't afford to pay you the same red line that somebody might. So think of it this way: is like, if I'm a nickel or 10 cents higher on a red line, I should be getting a much better experience. And if I'm not, then great, yeah, go chase the lower red line. But typically a company that's going to offer a higher red line, the reason they're doing that is, one, they understand their costs, and two, I guarantee you that they're investing into their program to give you a better sales platform that's going to get you a better experience, that's going to get you more volume, and obviously more volume is going to make you earn far more money than you would elsewhere.
Yep, I agree 100%. 100%. You get what you pay for. And again, folks, for what it's worth, I mean, here at Solar Surge, we do the most sales volume with our installers that have the highest red lines. It's not about a race to a bottom. It's about a long-term relationship. If you win, they win, customer wins, everybody wins. So Well, Jared, thanks again for all your time this afternoon. I know you've got to get running to the next engagement here. But again, I look forward to catching up with you on another podcast or at the next industry conference, and I wish you success in your business.
Love it, Joe. Thanks so much. Good luck to you as well. Talk to you soon.